Hello, everyone, and welcome back to History Class with Mr. Thurkelson. So today we're going to be beginning a series of 3 days of looking at the Age of Discovery. And I think that title should be pretty self-explanatory, meaning that we're going to be looking at, the discovery and the exploration of the world and new places and new things. So to begin, let us take a look at what is going to be a driving force behind it, and that is economics. So, the city of Constantinople, you guys should remember a little bit about that from your World I materials, and that is that major city that is, like, if you remember the Byzantine Empire, the city of Byzantium later gets renamed Constantinople by the Roman Emperor Constantine. It was the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire also. It is basically right on that border between the Middle East and Europe. It is the capital of modern-day Turkey, at least under its new name of Istanbul. But anyway, so this was originally a Christian city for our purposes today. That would, they would be in dispute with the Ottoman Empire. This is a very powerful, growing political entity in the world at this time. So, and they want Constantinople. It's a key city. Now, it is the gateway of trade between Europe and Asia. The Silk Road from China and India leads straight to the gates of Constantinople. Now, Europe, as we know, they want stuff. They always want stuff. They want luxuries that come from Asia. They want satins, silks, they want spices, they want these new medicines, they want all of these great things. And they get them by trading through Constantinople. But then something happens. The Ottoman Empire originally started out in northern Turkey, this area right here where my mouse is pointing at, this big hump right here that goes into the Black Sea, that's basically the homeland. And they just expand exponentially during this time. They take over most of modern-day Turkey. They're eventually going to get down into all of this area here, like Iraq, Syria, all of that. They will curve across North Africa, all the way up to like Tunisia. They're going to take parts of southern Russia and the Ukraine, like the Crimean Peninsula here. They're also going to take over a huge chunk of southeastern Europe. But before they do all of this, they are going to take, in 1453, the city of Constantinople, right here. And what that is going to do is that is now going to make them be in control of all that trade that Europe wants. Now, the Ottomans are what religion? They are Muslims. The city of Constantinople and Europe, on a greater scale, they are what religion predominantly? They are Christian. Do Christians and Muslims have a history of getting along well with one another? And remember, we're not that far away from the Crusades, historically speaking, where Christians and Muslims were at each other's throats constantly. So no, they're not on the best of terms, even on their best days, especially at this time. So what they're going to do is they're going to cut off trade with Europe, essentially. So now, and any trade that they do allow, they're going to jack those prices up extremely high so that the Europeans won't even want to buy anything. And if they do, they're going to pay out the nose for it. So what choice does Europe have? They can either give in to the Ottomans, or they can try and find another way to get to Asia, to India and China, to get the items that they want. that seems like the more acceptable idea. So that's what they're going to do, and that is how the age of discovery or the age of exploration begins. Finding a sea route to get to Asia so they don't have to deal with the Ottomans. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and find these alternate routes. The main thing that they have as an option is, well, part of it, they're looking to expand Christian influence, especially the Roman Catholics, because of the influx of Protestantism. So they want to find new people for the Catholic Church. So they're going to try and spread the religion that way. So anyway, away from the sidebar, we're now going to have Portugal get involved. They are the Western country in Europe. You know, they are right at the Atlantic Ocean, and they have easy access to get into the Mediterranean. So they actually have a tradition of sailing into the Atlantic, which most people tried to not do very much because their ships were not strong enough for the ocean currents and the waves. But the Portuguese are going to have some new technologies that are going to make exploring and going out into the unknown a lot more feasible. And those technologies that, you know, this guy, a prince of Portugal named Henry, who gets the nickname the Navigator, he's going to assemble all of these things and bring them together, all these tools, and that is what's going to give them the ability to be like that first major, like, European explorative country. So things that they are going to bring in. First is the Caravel. This is a larger ship, and it can withstand the ocean waves and currents and storms a lot better than any other ship that had previously been designed. He's going to send out ships to map out the coast of Africa so they have accurate maps. They're not guessing like, well, maybe it's a little further. Like, no, find out how far it is and map it all out. Give us accurate measurements, everything. The compass, which we know came from China, right? He's going to now have that as part of the navigation tools for ships so that they can more easily find their way and, you know, they don't get lost or anything. And we're going to introduce what is called an astrolabe. This is basically a tool that is going to allow people to navigate by using the stars and other celestial bodies, maybe of planets that you can see, so that you can help find your location on maps when you're out at sea and you don't have any land masses to help calculate where you are. Now, there are two main guys for Portugal that you need to know when talking about the beginning of exploration. The first one is Bartholomew Diaz, and he would be the first European to go around the Cape of Good Hope, which is the southernmost tip of Africa. And Vasco da Gama, who would be the first person to do a sea route that goes from Portugal all the way to the coast of India. All right, so they have established that it can be done. You can reach Asia by sailing around Africa. Africa is an enormous continent. It's like the second largest continent on the planet. They didn't know if they could even sail around it, but these guys, they proved that it can be done. And along the African coast, as they're sailing, they're establishing little trading posts so that they can have a trade business with the Africans that they come across. And that's going to help expand Portuguese influence in the world. All right. So now they can directly go to India and China, cutting out the middleman, which is the Ottomans, which is going to have lower prices, which means they can have bigger profits because there's no middleman. So there's a lot less overhead that they need to cover. So Portugal is first. They're making a bunch of money doing this trade. Other countries see it happening. They want in. So now it becomes a competition for who can get there faster and who can have more trading posts and who can get the better deals with the East. So 1492, we're going to see if we can find a shortcut. So most people did not think that the world was flat. They understood that it was round, but they thought that it was smaller than the world is. So if you're looking at a globe, you have all the continents and everything laid out, right? Now imagine cutting into the globe like a cake, and that slice that you're taking out is North and South America, and then you're pushing the two sides together, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, you push them together and now they're just one big ocean. That is what people thought the world looked like back in the 1400s and earlier. They had no idea that the Americas even existed. So that is what you need to understand. Now, I think you guys know where this is going. You see a guy going to Spain, he's got an idea, he's talking to Ferdinand and Isabella. Yes, I'm talking about Columbus, the Italian sailor who would, sail for Spain. Now, and this is his idea. We all know that he wants to sail west to get to the Indies, but he finds something else along the way. And the reason he even wanted to try this was because sailing around the southern tip of Africa was a very dangerous thing. You have two bodies of water meeting and they have, their current systems clash against each other. So it can be a very volatile area with storms. Very bad storms can happen in the ocean between the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. All right, so he proposes the idea, let's just sail west, and eventually we'll find India, and we can do trade with India and China. And, he goes to them multiple times to propose his idea, and they're like, you know what? Fine. You're getting annoying. Let's just give you these 3 small ships, and if we never hear from you again, fine. If you find something, fine. So that is how he gets his 3 ships, the Nina, Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Now, we all know that he finds the Caribbean, right? He lands in the Dominican Republic and he establishes the first European colony in the New World that is going to last. Now, he thinks that he's landed in the islands off the coast of India, so the people he finds there he calls Indians, because it's like people of India. Of course, we know that that is incorrect now, but during his voyages there, he's also going to discover Cuba, the Bahamas, and he's also going to make it to Central America. If I remember correctly, he landed in like Guatemala or Nicaragua, and he claimed it all for Spain, even though people already lived there. Hundreds of thousands of people were in these. If you combined all these areas together, you're looking at thousands and thousands of people. Who cares who was there? It's Spain's now. That's basically the mentality of the Europeans. It's like, hey, we're more powerful, you're ours now. Now, a guy who I enjoy talking about, Ferdinand Magellan. This was another guy sailing for Spain, and he was going to set sail to find a western route to get to Asia. So what he's going to do is he's going to become the first European to sail around the southern tip of South America and get into the Pacific Ocean. Now, his crew would be the first people to actually travel around the entire world. Notice I say crew. I say crew because Magellan doesn't even make it. He actually gets killed in the Philippines in 1521, like 2 years into the trip. Yeah, it basically he takes a club to the face and he's dead. So his crew then finishes the trip. Now, England, of course, is going to want to get involved. So what they're going to do is they're going to have an explorer whose English version of his name is John Cabot. His real Italian name is actually Giovanni Caboto, but for our purposes, John Cabot. And he is hired by England to sail and explore and to claim land for England. He is going to be the first European, at least in a very, very long time, to reach the Canadian coast. And he gets there in 1497. I say in a really long time because if you go back to like the year 1000, the Vikings actually were the first people to reach North America from Europe. And there is archaeological evidence to back that up, but we don't really need to get into that. So yeah, we're just talking about what's relevant to people who stayed in the Americas. All right, so Europe, we have the demand for gold, spices, and other natural resources. That is why people are looking for all of these new areas. And also to spread Christianity. And as they're migrating, they're wanting to convert the indigenous people to the new Christian faith, whether it's in Africa or in the Americas. They're wanting to spread their religions. And what we're going to find out is the political and economic competition is going to increase dramatically. They all wanted to win. They all wanted to find these routes to these new areas first. They all wanted to lay claim to territory. And it's going to get very competitive, and there's going to be wars over colonization between these nations. Now, once again, this was all possible because these tools were brought together. Separately, they're fine, but brought together, you can achieve a lot. That is having compasses, better ships, and accurate maps. All right. Now, a lot of these different things like the astrolabe and new like map making techniques actually came from the Islamic world, from the Muslim people. So these were techniques that were picked up by the Europeans, and then they just took the idea and ran with it. Right? And it's all brought together because of Prince Henry. Well, like I said before, you definitely need to know this name and what he did, his contribution to exploration. Now, the reason for explorers wanting to go are what I like to call, and many historians call, the 3 Gs. And once again with the bell. All right, the 3 Gs, gold, glory, and God. Well, a lot of people typically listed God, gold, and glory, but it's not always in those orders. So gold, got to make that money, got to get rich. Glory, everybody wants to be famous, right? And then God, got to spread the religion, got to do your part to get into heaven by doing good deeds, and that would be spreading the word to others who have not heard it before. Now, what we're going to see as a result of exploration and starting to set up shop in places, we're going to see overseas empires begin. And we're going to see this with England, France, Portugal. We're going to see it especially with Spain. Like, they have a lot more names on the list, obviously, because if you go back and forth between these, there's like one person per these guys where they were able to start establishing places. But Spain, a lot of people out there doing work. So, Spain and Portugal are the two top dogs. They are starting to get very competitive with each other. So what they're going to do is, instead of going to war, what they're going to do is they're going to go to the Pope, Pope Alexander VI, and he is going to draw up what is called the line of demarcation, and it's going to separate the world between Portugal and Spain. Everything west of this line is going to belong to Spain, and everything east of this line is going to belong to Portugal. All right. Now, the next page should be a map that's going to show what this looked like, and you tell me if you think it's fair or not. Everything that's yellow is Spain. Everything that's purple is Portugal. So, yeah, this might be fair for Portugal and Spain because, they each get a buttload of territory that they have influence over. Is it really fair for anybody else, though? No, not really. So what's going to happen is a lot of people are just going to ignore this, especially, the Protestant nations like, England. But finishing up with today, we're going to be talking about the exploits of these two gentlemen, Hernando Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, the men who conquered the most powerful kingdoms in the New World. So, real quick, the conquistadors, this is a basic setup that you would see them have. All right, you have the armor on the right. That was a typical set of armor that conquistadors would have, especially the more wealthy ones. Ones who maybe didn't have as much money, they would at least have the helmet, maybe the chest piece, or maybe, they would have some like thick leather armor. You would have things like these matchlock muskets, early guns, where basically you had a burning piece of wax covered rope, and it would like click forward when you pull the trigger into a pan that had black powder, and it would discharge and shoot the lead ball projectile. You have crossbows that are a lot faster and accurate to fire than the muskets, so that actually would have been the better weapon between the two. All right. This is actually a small hand cannon, so it's basically like a old school big bore shotgun. All right, we have swords, single-handed swords. This is a two-handed sword. They are the ones that would be like 5 feet long, 6 feet long in some cases when you get into some of the German-styled ones. All right, we also have pikes, which is just a extra long spear, and here we have what is called a halberd. It's basically a pole that has an axe head, a spear point, and a hook all in one. Very, very menacing weapons. And notice something else. These weapons are all steel. They're all very finely made steel weapons. That's a very important fact that you need to know and understand when talking about the conquistadors and their exploits in Central and South America. Now, a little bit of background. I know we've seen some of this information before, but we're going to go over the Western civilizations again real quick. Now, the Olmec. These are basically what we would call the origins of a lot of the Central American and South American cultures. You can kind of trace some similarities between them back to the Olmec. And they would be an inspiration for all of those people to follow. They were not around for a long time before the Spanish showed up, but you would find artifacts and ruins of the Olmecs. And like this big stone head here, if you see that or pictures of that somewhere, like, or just in general pictures, and there's a big stone head, you can probably guess that it's Olmec in origin. Now, the Mayan people were still around. They were still around at the time that the Spanish landed in Mexico and Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, all those places. And they were not as powerful as they once were. They were basically just some small independent states. There was no centralized government. They were no longer a strong empire. So the Spanish could easily just work their way through them. But the Aztecs, they were like the big boys of the day. They were the warrior culture that lived on an island in the middle of a lake called Lake Texcoco. The lake is no longer there. The lake is filled in by the city of Mexico City. And like these people, they practiced human sacrifice. They had thousands and thousands of people living in their capital city of Tenochtitlan. And I don't have a video of it, but there is a movie called Apocalypto, and it shows essentially what one of these human sacrifices would be like. I'll talk about it real quick because I find it pretty interesting. It would typically be a criminal, a slave, or a prisoner of war who would be sacrificed. And what happens is they are basically strapped down onto a stone slab table at the top of one of those big step pyramids that they have. And the priest is going to walk up to them with an obsidian dagger. Now, obsidian is volcanic rock that gets like atomically sharp blades, like they get sharp down to the atoms. So these are sharper than like a surgical scalpel. Okay. So they're going to take one of these daggers, they're going to plunge it into the sacrifice chest. They're going to slice them open. They're going to reach in and pull out their still beating heart. And of course, the person dies from that. Their head will be chopped off with an obsidian axe. And then their body is going to be pushed and tumbled down the stairs of the pyramid. And that is how the sacrifice is performed. But you might be asking why they do things that way. And that would be because, for the culture, they believe you have to give life to receive life. So it is a blood debt that they owe the universe. So the sun will not rise unless to give life to the people and to the land unless life is given in return. It's an exchange. That is the belief system behind human sacrifice for the Aztec people. Right, here's an artist rendition of what Tenochtitlan basically looked like. Now, Cortez, when he comes to Mexico, there is a lot of stories saying how like the people thought they were gods and things like that. That's not necessarily true. It's more likely that they were looked at as these powerful outsiders who they knew were people, and they just revered them as guests. So yeah, they would use this prestige to their advantage to gain a lot of power, and they would get some local tribes on their side and to take on the Aztec Empire, who basically ruled over everybody in the area. And so if you see this white line, they're coming from Cuba. They're making landfall in Veracruz, and then they're going to be going just all over the place. But most of the stuff we talk about happens right here in Tenochtitlan. Now, Cortez, he's going to meet the Aztecs. He's going to be very cautious. He's going to see what he can find out about them because he knows they have a very violent reputation. They are oppressive to the people that they rule. All right. He only had 600 soldiers, 15 men who were fighters from horseback, and he had 15 cannons and quite a few hundreds of indigenous warriors and people who helped carry their equipment from the tribes that he befriended on the way. Now, what he's going to do is he's basically going to come in, they're going to be welcomed, and then he's going to take the Aztec emperor, the king Montezuma, and he's going to kidnap him and basically make him a puppet, and they're going to try and squeeze out as much valuables as they can from the Aztecs, meaning gold. And this is not going to work in their favor because eventually the people are going to rise up, and when Montezuma goes out onto a balcony to try and calm everyone down, that don't go so well, and they wound up like stoning him to death. Like he got busted up pretty good and died from his injuries. And so then Cortez and his men had to actually fight their way out of the city some of them got killed. They killed a bunch of natives on the way too. And yeah, big defeat that is going to just lead to more bad stuff. Now, this little comic I just find funny. Go ahead and take a look at it real quick. All right. So Cortez, he ain't done. He's a fighter. He's going to regroup. He's going to get more men, and he's going to conquer the city. He's got another 1,100 Spaniards that are helping him out, plus all the like allied native warriors. And they're going to take the city. They're going to destroy the city, and they're going to take all the valuables they can back to Spain. And now the territory is theirs. It's an artist rendering of what some of those final battles in the streets of Tenochtitlan may have looked like. Now, the Inca, kind of similar but different from what happens with Cortez and the Aztecs. So the Inca, they'd only been around for a very short amount of time, like before the Spanish arrived. So they'd only been in power for maybe about 100 years. And they're in the South American mountain chain of the Andes along the western coast of South America, right on the Pacific. Their capital is the city of Cusco, which you can see on the map is right here, this dot that I'm circling around. Now, when Pizarro arrives, he is their Cortez. And it's going to happen faster than Cortez because he used disease to his advantage. Natives in the Americas did not have the immunities that Europeans did to certain diseases, particularly smallpox. That is a very, very dangerous and deadly disease at this time, and it just would wipe out a lot of native peoples in the Americas. So while that's going on, a civil war breaks out in the Incan Empire, and it's like, princes, the brothers who are in, one of them would be next in line because their father died due to disease. They go to war against each other. Pizarro would just wait it out, and whichever one lived survived the civil war and became the new king. He killed that king. And when people were up in arms over that, and they attacked the Spanish, there would be a lot of fighting, but the Spanish steel and guns and everything would, of course, prevail and win out the day. Now, this older artist rendering, it shows some craziness going on. It's showing Spaniards who have been taken captive by native peoples. Yeah, in some places there may have been a little bit of cannibalism going on. But what I really want to talk about is what's happening right here up front. You see this guy, he's getting something poured down his throat. One of the more interesting, crazy ways that Spaniards had been executed by the Incans was they were captured, and what the Incans would do is they would take gold, because they had a lot of gold. They would melt it down, and they would actually pour this molten gold down the throats of the Spanish soldiers, and they would basically burn from the inside out and die. So it's like, hey, you want some gold? Here's some gold for you. Now, I can't find the pictures anymore, but I have actually seen a picture of the gold that was found in like a conquistador's grave that had been, he was buried, and the gold was still inside of him, and the gold was inside, like it was taken out of his skeleton for the picture, but it was in the shape of like crispy burnt up organs, because it filled up like their stomach and everything, just cooked them. So very interesting stuff. This is where we're leaving off today. When we pick up next time, we will continue the story and talking about what's going on in North America. All right, talk to you guys then.